Hey everyone, my name is Joshua Whittam, and this is an adaptation of a presentation I gave a couple of weeks ago for the GoCaps program on pursuing a career in games. Now, before we get started, I want to clarify that a lot of this is based on my opinion or application of knowledge that I've learned over the last couple of years. I have yet to actually have a career in the game industry, and the feelings and beliefs of other people may not match up with mine. This is my perspective on things. So, with that taken care of, let's get started. So, who am I? I am a third-year game design student at Columbia College Chicago with a minor in fiction writing. More importantly, what have I made? I have two published projects, the first of which is a game called Arc, which I made as a final project for my advanced game engine scripting class. It's a puzzle dungeon inspired by the 2D entries in the Legend of Zelda series. I'll go ahead and play the trailer real quick. Now, Arc was a solo project. I programmed everything, I put it all together. The art was royalty-free, acquired it online. The music was made by a friend of mine. Other than that, all of the fairly simple systems and levels that are present in the game are my creation. The other project that I have that's published is Kakate Koyo, which is a 2D platform party fighter where you play as cats, you catch fish, you hit each other with fish, try to score points and be the first to 7 or destroy each other's shrines to win. Kakate Koyo is a current project, part of the capstone for my degree program. I'll go ahead and play the trailer and then I'll finish talking about it. Kakate Koyo is not a solo project. I've been working with a team of 3 other people. My primary roles on the team have been level design and some mechanic design. I put together the playable space for the game and scripted some minor features, and I've also handled a lot of asset import and project management kind of things. Both of these trailers, by the way, are up on my YouTube channel where this video is as well, so if you want to check those out, feel free. So why am I studying game design? Playing games has been a pastime of mine for a while, but it's about a lot more than that. I have to be creating things. If I'm not making things, I go nuts. Whether that's, writing something, or coding a mechanic, or even just coming up with new ideas for games. Beyond that, there's not a right answer. There are just a lot of different ways of doing things. Mario and Sonic both jump, but their jumps work very differently, and they work very well for the environment that they are jumping in. So I'm going to go off for a little bit and talk about the roles that people have in the game industry. So the three primary roles are art, design, and programming. I'm going to give each of those their own slide, so that's all I'm going to say about them for the moment. But some other roles that people have include audio. They make the music and sound effects and handle the voice recording and things like that. I don't have any idea how they do it. They're wizards, but they do good work. The other role I'm going to touch on is producer. Producers keep the main project vision. They assign and organize tasks, and they usually are the lead of the leads of the various other teams. So the lead artist, the lead designer, the lead programmer would report to the producer to receive tasks that they would then distribute among their respective teams. The producer is the one that keeps everything organized and cohesive as a project. So, artists. Artists create the visual assets for the game. This can be models, sprites, textures, and the like. They also tend to export them and ready them for use in the game. The programs they use vary. To my knowledge, Maya and 3ds Max are common tools for 3D artists, and 2D is a lot less consistent. I've seen people use Photoshop, I've seen people use Illustrator. The artist for Kakate Koyo uses a program called Sprite specifically for pixel art. So there's a lot of variety there. Now I'm including some specializations on each of these. These are basically just trivia. You don't really need to know these. A lot of the time, depending on the size of the company you're working with or the team you're working with, you may or may not have dedicated roles for this kind of thing. These are just some areas of specialty for whatever role we're discussing. So for artists, specialties include technical art, which handles rigging, asset import, and the like. They tend to be a hybrid art and programming role. VFX artists create special effects, like particle effects, shaders, things like that. They are primary members responsible for making your game look a lot cooler than it actually is. Environment artists, as the name implies, create the environment. This can be either creating pieces of the environment, like tiles for a 2D game, that the designers then put together to make the actual playable space, or it can mean going over a white-boxed level layout that a designer has put together and making it look like not white boxes. Then character artists, also fairly self-explanatory. They make the players, NPCs, any monsters that the player might face. Anything that moves around or is interactive as an entity in the game, the character artists will handle. Moving on from that, designers. Designers tend to be responsible for the core concepts of the game. There are exceptions. I know at least one of the other capstone projects in my program right now is actually run by an artist. So it varies pretty wildly, but designers generally do a lot of thought work. So they will think of the mechanics, think of how the mechanics can be utilized, think of how they'll interact. Generally, a designer has to have some knowledge of both art and programming so they can effectively communicate between the two, because they'll often be giving specifications to the other disciplines. I need a system that does this, and I need to modify this, this, and this. I need a character that looks like this would make sense to be able to do this. I need animations for these actions, things like that. Designer specialties include level design, which is one of my points of interest. Level designers compose and modify the playable game spaces. For instance, the screenshot here of the tile map used for the level in Kikatikoyo. Systems designers create and tweak core systems, like power-ups and things like that. Anything that requires more than just adjusting a couple of numbers, a system designer is probably responsible for balancing. UI designers organize menus, the heads-up display, and other user interface. And UX designers, or user experience, they hone the experience to make the game as usable and enjoyable as possible. UX design overlaps with just about every other design role because any designer is going to want to make sure things are as approachable and understandable as possible. Finally, we've got programming. Programmers create the in-depth core functionality of the game. Oftentimes, they'll make systems to fit specifications so a designer can make gameplay or balance adjustments. Sometimes a designer will create a basic mock-up of a system just for proof of concept, and then they'll hand it over to a programmer, and the programmer will promptly delete it all and write it from scratch because they hate design code. Which is fair. They're the ones who have the most knowledge of the actual coding process. Programming specialties include gameplay programming, which focuses on the core mechanics and the feel of the game. The jumping, the battling, any systems the player regularly interacts with is probably going to be gameplay programming. Network programming focuses on the online or local area network connection. Any interaction between multiple consoles or computers is handled by the network programmers. AI programmers create and implement enemy and other AI logic, and game tools programmers don't actually focus on the game itself. They focus on creating tools for the other disciplines to create their products more effectively or efficiently. So they can make art tools that will help the artists to make things ready for the unique aspects of the game. They can create level design tools, things like that. So, what's the difference? Presumably, I don't need to tell you what the difference between an artist and a programmer is. But designers have a lot of overlap between the two. At best, a designer could usually function as a low-level artist or programmer. So they could create some placeholder art or, like I mentioned before, make mock-up systems that can be used for proof of concept before handing it over to a programmer to make something that actually works more effectively. Usually a designer will have a specialization in art or programming. My personal specialization is programming over art, and this is for a couple of reasons. One, entry-level design jobs are tough to come by. Usually, if you want to get a design job, you have to get your foot in the door by either doing art or programming for a while first. Nintendo's not going to hire you and have you immediately start working on Mario power-ups or levels. You're going to be coding something specific or mocking up a mushroom. And on smaller teams, a designer will have to wear a lot of hats. There aren't enough people that you can do just one thing, generally. Designers cover a wide range of roles, most of which I've discussed already, implementing art, fine-tuning systems, creating levels, but no matter what specialty a designer has, they focus heavily on player experience, which includes usability, balancing, accessibility, organization, clarity, things like that. Anything that makes your game more approachable to a wide audience. So, I'm going to go off on another bit of a tangent to talk about game engines. A game engine is a program that is used to make video games. The two most commonly utilized engines are Unity and Unreal, both of which are available for free and both of which have been used to create a wide variety of products, from indie to more high-budget, high-profile projects. Unity was Unity was used to create games like Overcooked, Ori and the Blind Forest, Cuphead, and Hearthstone. And Unreal has made projects like Life is Strange, Mortal Kombat 10, Mass Effect, Gears of War, things like that. A wide range of different projects. They each have their strengths and weaknesses, and it often comes down to the team proficiencies and the needs of the project. Unity is generally easier to pick up. It uses C# for scripting, and it's widely considered to have better 2D and mobile options. C# as a programming language is a little bit... It's kind of got more training wheels than a programming language like C++, which can often allow you to do more, but you also need to be really careful with the ways in which you do more. C++, you can quickly end up with memory leaks and address issues that can cause significant problems down the line. However, downsides to Unity are that some features are not available for free. The dark theme, some of the particular analytics, and things like that, you have to be using a paid version of Unity for. You also have to have a splash screen if you're using the free version. And because of that free version splash screen thing, and because of the Unity asset store that makes so many different models and systems and helpful tools available, Unity has somewhat of a reputation for low-quality asset flips, shovelware, and low-effort projects. Justified or not, this is a viewpoint that some people have of Unity as an engine. Any engine has low-effort projects that people try to push out there, especially if the engine is free. Unity's just hit its cycle of that more quickly than some of the other engines. Again, it can be used for a lot of really good things. Some people just have a negative opinion of it because of all of those other projects. Now, Unreal is more easily capable of high-end graphics, and it includes a blueprint scripting system to code, quote-unquote, with flowcharts instead of using a traditional programming language. The drawbacks are that the UI is a little bit dense, so if you don't know exactly where the thing you're looking for is, it can be difficult to find. And Unreal is performance intensive. It will not run on lower-end computers, and the projects have the same issue. Creating a game in Unreal requires that the players of that game have a better system than some of the games that you'd need for Unity, or that you make for Unity. Unreal also doesn't have nearly as much documentation as Unity does, particularly surrounding the blueprints. So sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to pick up and use than Unity is. A lot of larger game studios have proprietary game engines, so maybe they're based on Unity or Unreal, but they have their own specifications and specific systems that allow them to better create the projects that they are working on. Some of these are just extensions, others are complete game engines that they've developed in-house. Now, state of the industry. This slide, more than a lot of the others, is heavily based on my opinion, as someone who hasn't worked in the game industry, I just see a lot of information from it. I've talked with people who have, and this is the result of that interaction. So other people likely have different thoughts and feelings on the events of the industry right now. With that in mind, there's a lot of good in the industry. The industry is small, and the vast majority of veterans are more than willing to help you learn new things. Especially on a larger team, it is to the benefit of everyone to get you up to speed with the company's way of doing things as fast as possible. So people will work with you, they will help you to gain more proficiency, get better at the things you want to do, and really anywhere you work should be a learning experience for you. In addition, people are starting to better recognize the people behind the games they play. As a result, there's more support and more transparency for game workers. Game Workers Unite is just one example. They're not quite a union, but they are a group that is discussing how to make game development a more stable career. Better for the people, better for managing the time and the pay and things like that, so people can more healthily create games. The downside: the workplace environment is not always the best, especially for women or any sort of minority. I'm not going to go into detail, but there's a lot that you could find just from a quick Google search on the topic. Basically, a lot of the ways that people kind of interact in negative ways on the internet can very well extend to the workplace environment. Aside from that, there's crunch time. It's unfortunately common, particularly on larger projects. Some studios, whether truthfully or not, have been cited as having 100-hour work weeks. And it's debatable whether 40-hour work weeks are really good for people. When you bump that up to 60, 80, 100 hours, especially when people aren't getting paid for that overtime necessarily, you lead to a lot of unhealthy habits and burnout and much less productivity and work than you could actually have if you allowed people to rest. In some ways, that's getting a lot better because people are more aware of it and the fact that it's a problem, but the idea of crunch is my personal least favorite part of trying to go into the industry as someone who would like to have a family and, sleep. Moving on from the doom and gloom, development environments. Now, before we get started here, I should note that using the terms indie and studio to differentiate is a little misleading, because any indie group comprised of more than 2 guys in a basement is generally a studio. For my purposes, studio refers to a large, well-known development company with more than one major IP, or a subsidiary thereof, like Blizzard, NetherRealm, Microsoft, Sony, or Nintendo, where indie teams have a game, 2 or 3 games that are much lower scale, lower budget, and generally don't have all of the resources that a massive company would. So, with that in mind, indie development. Working indie allows for a lot more creative freedom to create the niche, the bizarre, the experimental, whatever the heck it is you want to make. Fighting game featuring cats? Sure, go for it. If a game does well on an indie level, the profits for the game are split between fewer people, so a game can sell 100,000 copies, and that money's getting split between 10, 20, 50 people, not dozens or hundreds. Additionally, there don't need to be as many people on board with an idea to get it off the ground. You only need to convince 10, 20, 50 people that you're not crazy, as opposed to the entire corporate side of a major company. The drawbacks, though, are that anyone working indie has to be a jack of all trades. There aren't nearly as many people to allow you to do just one thing. So a designer might have to manage the social media side of things, do the marketing, a programmer might have to create art. It varies based on the environment, but an indie developer has to do more than one thing most of the time. There's also a lot of risk. In 2 years or more on one game, when you don't have the financial support of a past project that's still doing well. If that game doesn't do well, then you're 2 years down and don't have anything to show for it, which hurts. It's especially not a great place to start off. Now, studio work. You will have a paycheck. Whether or not the game you're currently working on is released and available, a studio will pay you for your work. As someone who likes to eat, that sounds like a good deal. There are also more people available to help you learn, and more ability to do so because there are more people who are working on the project, so someone could potentially be spared for a little bit to help you get up to speed with the rest of the team. You can also effectively contribute to a larger team by being really good at one thing. You know, a company like Blizzard has an economy department where you can be an economy designer, and that can be what you do. An indie team probably doesn't have an economy department for managing their massive online game. However, studios don't offer a lot of creative freedom to just anyone. Now, generally, you will be given a task and you will work on that task instead of brainstorming and creating and coming up with new ideas that could be used on the project. Again, this varies pretty wildly based on the environment and the state of things at the time, but as a general rule, you're working on the thing that they tell you to work on. Additionally, Mario Odyssey can sell millions, and that money is split between shareholders and the corporate side and producers and the dozens or hundreds of people that worked on that game. So a game has to do really, really well for you to be able to make any significant percentage of that money. The larger an environment is also means more people that interact, and the more people that are interacting, the more likely those interactions are going to be on the negative side. Workplace toxicity and crunch time are more common in those larger environments. And as much as studios generally tend to have a bit of a buffer, sometimes they just go under. Again, things like Game Workers Unite are working on ways to support the developers when things like that happen, but the industry ebbs and flows, and sometimes things don't go as well as expected. Moving on from yet more doom and gloom, do you need to go to college for this? The short answer is no. However, the biggest takeaway from a degree program is experience, both in actually working on games and in working with a team. I mean, if you're going to go into indie, you could just teach yourself and start making a game. That is a perfectly valid way of doing things. But being in a program with other people allows you a space to have things that don't go your way and not be 2 years down for it, and it allows you to work with other people who are working at the same pace that you are, in the same place that you are, who have a common vocabulary, and want to do what you do. Going through a degree program is a great way to know some people in the industry so you actually have anyone you can talk to who could potentially help you get a job. I'll get to that in a moment. Working even with a small team allows you to do much more than you could if you were working on your own. To use myself as an example, Kakate Koyo has completely original art and a great deal more polish than Arc, and there wasn't that much more time spent on Kakate Koyo as opposed to Arc. Even just working with 3 more people has allowed this project to be a lot more than a project that I made by myself. Now, game design degrees don't necessarily matter as much either. Whether or not you have a degree that's relevant to game development matters a whole lot less than what you can bring to the table. The main difference between, say, a computer science degree and a game-specific game programming degree, or a digital art or game art degree, is the experience specifically related to making games. By going through those programs, you may make art that would be used in a game, or you may create a game with other programmers, but you probably don't have the same experience of working across disciplines to create a project in an environment more like what you would have in a game studio. So, what is the best way to learn? Short answer, once again, is there isn't one. Learning isn't one size fits all. But what I would recommend is kind of based on what I've done and studies that have been done by, like, Duolingo, for instance. What I would recommend is look for tutorials, because there are a ton of tutorials out there. YouTube, whether using the channel like Brackies or other channels like that. Unity has an official YouTube channel where they post a ton of tutorials. There are resources available, and lynda.com or other more specific learning sites are other options. Some libraries offer you access to lynda.com, otherwise you would have to pay for it, so that may or may not be the best option, but they certainly do have game development tutorials out there. What I'd recommend is work through them slowly, work along with them, and work at a pace that allows you to retain the knowledge. If you need to work on recalling and actually internalizing information, focus on a topic for some time, several hours, a day or two, whatever works best, then let it sit for a few days. Go back after that and see what you've retained, and that'll tell you what you still need to work on. That's the tactic that Duolingo uses for learning a language. I see no reason that it couldn't work for something like this. So, what else is important? You should know media. Yes, playing games is a good thing, if you do it right. It's sort of like watching movies as a director or reading as an author. If you take the time to actually learn from the things that you're working with, there are plenty of examples of what to do, what not to do, and how to do things. The game industry has been around for close to 40 years at this point, in the mainstream. If you're trying to do something, chances are there's an example of it that you could learn from, whether it's a good example or not. In addition, know a variety of genres. Like I said, there are a lot of good examples to pull from. I'd recommend playing genres that you wouldn't necessarily go out of your way to play normally. For instance, in my case, I play a lot of platformers. I play a lot of RPGs. I have plenty of examples to pull from if I am trying to make a platformer or an RPG. What I don't have examples of are things like shooters or racing games. So there's a lot for me to learn from playing a racing game or two, or some Call of Duty, than there is for me to learn from playing yet another Kirby, Yoshi, Castlevania, Mario, Mega Man, something like that. Not going to stop me from playing those games that I love, but it will encourage me to include some more variety in the kinds of things that I spend my time on. In addition, no media that isn't games. Even no history, no pop culture, movies, music, books, TV shows. You never know what can possibly be an inspiration. Ed, Ed, and Eddie was one of the inspirations for some members of our team for Kakate Koyo. Self-improvement is another important thing. You always want to be getting better at doing the things that you're doing, and you're not gonna get better without doing those things. You can't make things better if you're not making things. What I'd recommend is making small commitments. Try a concept that you can give a very specific endpoint to. Reach that endpoint and move on. You're going to learn a lot more from trying a variety of things over the course of several months than spending years poking at a master game concept that you aren't making any progress on. It's tough to face right at first, but that's the way it works. You're going to learn more if you are trying a variety of things. And as I mentioned earlier, there are plenty of tutorials out there. Soft skills are another important thing that will help with success in the workplace. These include things like interpersonal relationships, conflict resolution, making commitments, keeping yourself organized so you can actually do things instead of just staring at the pile of things you have to do. A couple of books that I would recommend that an instructor of mine has pushed maybe a little too hard, but from reading them, they're filled with a lot of useful information. Conscious Business by Fred Kaufman has a lot of information on managing those soft skills and improving them in yourself. And Getting Things Done by David Allen offers one system for keeping yourself present and organized. You can find them on Amazon or other places that you can find books. They're not terribly expensive. They're good resources. So, what do I do? For one, I keep a bi-weekly blog. On this blog, I post alternating design analysis pieces and fiction work so I can exhibit both of my specialties. And it demonstrates that I can make and keep a regular commitment that no one else is holding me to. It allows me to have a regular outlet for both analysis and writing so I can hone my craft and get better at it. And it gives me room to say that I know what I'm talking about. Other than that, I am never not analyzing things. I will go watch a movie and I will analyze shot composition. I'll analyze the timing of the trailers. I'll analyze puzzles in and out of video games. And pretty much anything that I can analyze and learn from, I will. It drives my partner nuts sometimes. I'm lucky she likes me. Additional resources that I'd recommend. Gamasutra is a site with news and articles from industry professionals, similar to what I do, but on a much greater scale. They also have job openings and such posted there, and a pretty active community. They're a good resource. And the YouTube channel Extra Credits, which has a series on the industry, both from the lens of a player and from a creator standpoint. They cover a wide variety of topics, to, from loot boxes and more contemporary gaming issues to just the process of making a game, why things are so expensive. It's a wide range of things, and definitely worth several hours of your time. So, to end things off, my favorite part of working in the industry is that my goofy nonsense can become a playable reality in a matter of weeks. I can ask a what-if question and work with a team to make an answer to it. What if our fighting game revolved around fishing? What if we were chased through a discotheque by a demon-possessed John Travolta? By working with other people, I can A, prove that maybe I'm not crazy, or that I am exactly as crazy as everyone thinks I am, and B, I can make something that other people enjoy. Now, having been to playtesting events like the Chicago Toy and Game Fair or the Logan Theater playtesting party that these pictures have been from, I've seen people play something that I've worked really hard on, and I've seen them enjoy it. And that is one of the most fulfilling experiences I've ever had. That is it for this presentation. So I'd like to thank you for bearing with me for as long as it's been, and I hope you have a good day.